I'm gonna wipe that eating grin off your face, cause radio is dead!
What just happened?
So, I finally watched Hazbin Hotel 3 weeks ago after some persistent pestering from my friends, and unsurprisingly, I enjoyed it. The show has excellent characters, animation, musical numbers, etc., and it's definitely worthy of its viral success. But, that scene, that 1 single minute and a half battle between Adam and Alastor during the finale felt so off to me that I had to analyze why. And that became a deeper dissection into Hazbin Hotel's pacing, world-building, character development, specifically for Alastor, and magic system. But before we begin, I want to acknowledge that most shows these days expect fandoms to engage with ancillary content outside of the main work, such as live streams, spin-offs, social media posts, etc. However, for this video, I only want to talk about what is strictly published in the main canon body of work, since most viewers won't know anything about the show beyond the main series. Therefore, I won't be discussing Hell of a Boss or any content that doesn't strictly come from the pilot/season 1 of Hazbin Hotel. Additionally, we need to be conscious of the fact that it's difficult to discuss a show before it's complete, so some of this video will naturally have some conjecture regarding the overall story trajectory that may be inaccurate to the eventual final product. Now, let's dive in. Hazbin Hotel is an animated series for adults that features an animation style reminiscent of 90s Cartoon Network shows like Powerpuff Girls and Dexter's Laboratory. The show became a viral sensation when the pilot debuted on YouTube in October 2019, and the entertainment company A24, famous for making prestige indie projects such as Everything Everywhere All at Once and Ex Machina, made a series commitment in August 2020. However, the series didn't air until after Prime Video came aboard and officially ordered 2 seasons of the show, as announced in The Hollywood Reporter on September 28, 2023. This gives us background into 2 important pieces of information. 1. That Amazon has a lot of faith in the series to round out its adult animation slate. These days, it's incredibly difficult to get a second season commitment for any show in Hollywood, animated or otherwise, so this is an impressive feat in and of itself. But most importantly for today's purposes, the number of seasons a studio orders has a huge impact on its development, as the creators need to know, roughly, how much time they can expect to get to tell their story. Of course, the most ideal version of this setup would be if the length of time commissioned is equal to the time the creators need to tell their story, but what that means and looks like is always in a constant state of flux, balancing the creative and business needs of the production. I mean, who hasn't seen a series drag on for too long or a show cut down in its prime? Therefore, this video will be based on the presupposition that the series' overall story was developed with a 2-season story arc in mind. Of course, there could be room for potentially renewing the series for additional seasons in the future, and the number of episodes for season 2 has yet to be confirmed. But let's currently proceed with the idea that the story is supposed to take place over 2 seasons, with each season being structured over 8 24-minute episodes like season 1. Not including the 31-minute pilot episode, this means that the series roughly gets 384 minutes of screen time to tell its story, or in other words, the full Hazbin narrative would roughly be equal to 4 90-minute movies, plus the 31-minute long pilot and 24 additional minutes. And 2, the fact that the pilot episode was available to the public before the release of the full series is also unique. Obviously, this release strategy was part of the reason the show gained a dedicated online following and was picked up by a studio to begin with. But it also meant that the long delay left fans in a state of eager anticipation and high expectation for when it debuted this past January. Unfortunately, this major delay meant that some fans came away disappointed, as they thought the show would take a different direction. And in fact, this is actually the main reason I personally waited until the entire show aired in order to binge it, so I wouldn't have my own preconceptions about what the show would be, since pilots aren't meant to be precise, standalone works that the public sees before the studio. As the creator of Gravity Falls, Alex Hirsch, said, 2 of the hardest episodes to write in television are the pilot and the last episode. The pilot is the hardest to write because you have to convince people to fall in love with you. And the last episode is the second hardest to write because you have to convince people that's a good thing to break up. I think about this quote a lot when evaluating pilots, and I believe 2 of the key things that the viewer needs to know in order to fall in love are 1. What is the essential concept of the show? And 2. Who are the characters? These 2 questions can further be broken down into things such as, does the concept have a unique/fresh take on its story? What is the world like that we're stepping into? Are the characters memorable, relatable, and or interesting? Are there any specific/overarching themes immediately evident right off the bat, etc.? And Hazbin's pilot is strong. It nails the visual style, tone, etc., and most importantly, it introduces the core concepts of the show and memorable main cast. Plus, it includes 2 musical numbers and a musical intro in a fast-paced, fun way that gets audiences to understand what the show is and isn't right off the bat. And by the end of the pilot, we're essentially hooked by the 2 main questions it presents. 1. Can a soul in hell be redeemed to go to heaven and escape the extermination specifically through means of Charlie's Hotel? And 2. Who is Alastor? Or what is the radio demon's backstory/motivations? Both of these questions set up the essential concept and characters of the show. They also establish the core mysteries of the narrative, and the detailed stylized animation helps create the fantastical world it's set in. This leads us into Season 1, which opens with a monologue by Charlie that sets up the ordinary world of the series. As Joseph Campbell states in The Writer's Journey, most stories take the hero out of the ordinary mundane world and into a special world, new and alien. For Charlie, the ordinary world is that of her kingdom, Hell, which originated as the dark pit her parents created after giving humans free will, which allowed evil to enter into the world. She says that after her parents were cast out of heaven as punishment for their act, her father, Lucifer, was ashamed and, quote, lost his will to dream. Meanwhile, her mother Lilith thrived, empowering demonkind with her voice and her songs, and as the numbers of Hell grew, so did its power. Threatened by this, Heaven made a truly heartless decision that every year they would send down an army, an extermination, to ensure Hell and its sinners could never rise against them. But Lilith's hope remained, and her dream was passed down to their precious daughter, the Princess of Hell. This opening monologue fleshes out the fundamental setting and problem for the main narrative that the pilot teed up for the series. However, other than this monologue, we're left with a lot of questions about how the world of Hell actually operates before we get transported by episode 6 to the realm of heaven and the season finale concludes. This is because the series has put a hat on a hat, or introduced too many concepts to the show's current runtime. To illustrate this, let's take a look at how many significant characters are introduced per episode. As you can see, by introducing at least one new character per episode, the series is quite limited in how much time it can devote to developing the original cast that was present in the pilot. Episodes 1 through 3 split their focus between establishing the types of activities Charlie believes the main cast needs to do in order to achieve redemption, like trust exercises, and introducing other characters, like the V's. Meanwhile, episode 4 is the only episode where we actually get to spend significant time developing the relationships between the core characters we were introduced to in the pilot, in which we learn more about Angel Dust's contract with Valentino. But then by episode 5, we start barreling towards the finale, with a key setting change in episode 6 when the audience is introduced to Heaven. Of course, since this show is a musical that is to some degree self-aware, the pacing doesn't have to work like a straightforward narrative. This is because the songs themselves can work to give the audience answers regarding exposition, backstory, and character development/insight. However, if we're operating at a breakneck pace of 8 24-minute episodes, we still need to maximize every minute of screen time to its fullest extent. Unfortunately, the combination of an uneven distribution of limited screen time for the main characters, introducing a new character almost every episode, and introducing a new setting in Heaven for an entire episode before we get a thorough understanding of Hell, means that the series doesn't have a lot of time to develop the main cast or establish the rules of its world building for Hell and Heaven. Understandably, if the creators only get 2 seasons to tell their story, they would want to have season 1 be the setup, with season 2 containing the resolution/payoff. But unfortunately, it comes off as season 1 biting off a little more than it can chew in terms of incorporating all the ideas it wanted to get across. This leads us to the second point, that season 1 should have delved deeper into clarifying the rules of the world it takes place in. Now obviously, it can be a good thing to leave viewers in the dark about certain details of your world. Is it still too soon to reference midichlorians? And it's clear that the show wants to explore how the world of Hell and Heaven operate in season 2, and that the creators have thought through these answers. Like most great shows, there are a lot of amazing world-building details shown in the background and design choices that are evidence enough of this thoughtfulness. But there are a few things that would have been helpful to clarify in season 1. Specifically, what exactly is the governmental structure of Hell and the particulars of the deal made with Heaven regarding the extermination every year? Lucifer is clearly seen as the king of Hell, as Serpentius calls him Your Majesty, and Mimsy scolds Alastor for not warning her that she's in mixed company. And Charlie's princess status is also confirmed by Valentino, calling her Your Majesty when she visits his set, and Alastor's introduction of her to Rosie as Princess Charlie Morningstar, daughter of Lucifer and heir to the throne of Hell. Furthermore, it's alluded that Lucifer actually took part in the negotiations regarding the extermination, as Luke tells Charlie, the only reason you're still here is because Daddy gave you and your hellborn kind a pardon from an Exorcist's blade. How's that feel, to know how little you matter? And Charlie outright confirms he does in episode 5 when she says he let the extermination happen to begin with. They just had a meeting and said, go ahead and kill everyone. Also, it's clear that Lucifer has some sort of interdimensional political power as a monarch, brokering treaties and setting up meetings. As evidenced by Sarah informing Adam, well, you failed to control the demons and rust, and now Lucifer is involved, setting up an audience for his misguided daughter. However, it's also clear that Lucifer isn't exactly a hands-on king in most of the day-to-day matters of his denizens. Sure, we could speculate that Lilith played a more integral part in ruling Hell, as the opening monologue alludes to her voice as empowering demons, but the simple fact remains that the specific role of the monarchy in governing and protecting Hell is unclear. The show actually does offer a fairly reasonable explanation as to Lucifer's motivations for agreeing to the extermination in the first place and being a bit hands-off in his ruling style. Again, in the opening monologue, we learned that Lucifer was never allowed to see the good that came from humanity, only the cruel and the wicked, and therefore doesn't have faith in his people. As he explicitly tells Charlie, alright, look, I love that you want to see the best in people, but these sinners, they're just the worst. I don't know how much you can realistically expect from them. Our people, Charlie, are awful. They got gifted free will and look what they did with it. It doesn't matter how well-intentioned you are, they're always going to disappoint you. Although, once Charlie is endangered, it's clear that he will step in and use his powers to protect her from the exorcists. So monarchical invention, with the proper motivation, isn't completely off the table. But if anything, this further complicates our understanding as to what exactly an overlord's position in hell really is, and how it relates to the monarchy. This is because in episode 3, Overlord Carmilla Carmine calls Hell's other sovereign overlords together because they represent the controlling powers of their city. Together, they own millions of souls at risk with the new extermination schedule. They need to discuss what can be done to minimize the impact to their interest. So does this mean Hell's overlords rule over just Pentagram City, or over the entire 9 circles of Hell, as alluded to by Katie Killjoy? 66 News explicitly says that, after the recent extermination, many areas are now up for grabs. Demons all over Hell are already duking it out to gain new territory. And Vox says in the finale song that nature abhors a power vacuum after Alastor fled the final battle. This implies that overlords can be toppled and their power/territory can be reclaimed by others. And what does it take to qualify as an overlord? Angel thus refers to not being big on politics when Vaggie questions why he hasn't heard about the radio demon, so clearly there's some relationship here between the overlords, the monarchy, and the territories they rule over. And what does Carmilla mean about, quote, minimizing the impact to the overlord's interests? Do the overlords want to protect the souls they own out of compassion or self-interest? What exactly is the worth of a soul? To a certain extent, it's clear that both overlords and the monarchy deal in souls, but there's also some kind of typical monetary exchange that's accepted in Hell. Valentino says to Charlie that he can make her a star, make them both richer than, well, her papito, and Charlie bribes Cherry Bomb with a stack of cash to take Angel and the gang out in episode 6. Additionally, Angel also offers a group of demons cash in order to make up for Nifty taking their drinks. So it's unclear as to what qualifies one to be an overlord and what role cash and souls play in the power and wealth dynamics of Hell. This is why, instead of visiting heaven, it would have been interesting to see a court scene in Hell to help flesh out how all of the powers of Hell relate to each other before diving into another realm altogether. Especially since Adam mentions, for those of us with divine ordainment, extermination is entertainment. So it's clear that heaven also has a hierarchy of angels and souls that could be similar to Hell's monarchy and overlords. To be fair, I want to reiterate that I do think the creators have a vision for how the government system works, and I don't mind if the show wants to keep a bit of mystery and keep exposition to a minimum. However, even a small line from Carmilla saying something like, and as we all know, the king signed away our souls, or since the queen's protection left, our numbers have dwindled, or another small throwaway tidbit to clarify what exactly the worth of a soul is to an overlord, and the overlord's relationship to the monarchy would have been helpful. Additionally, aside from clarifying the overlord's position in Hell, it would have been helpful to give a little more context into how the rules of the afterlife work. In the pilot, Angel jokes that it's too late for Vaggie to kill him as that, quote, would make me double dead? Ha! And where exactly do I go? To double hell? But in the series, it's clear that there is some sort of additional afterlife/consequence for souls. When Adam meets Charlie in the first episode of the series, he asks his Lieutenant Lute, how many demons did you kill this year in the extermination? Thereby implying that demons/souls can actually die again. Not to mention, of course, the series cliffhanger revealing that Serpentius reappears in heaven after he sacrifices himself in the battle against Adam's angelic forces. As to the mystery of Serpentius' reappearance, it's clear the show wants to tackle this in season 2, but it would have been better to use this cliffhanger as the first introduction the audience receives of heaven, and then shift Charlie's heavenly courtroom visit to season 2. This is because her visit essentially demystifies heaven, and proves it's a realm that Lucifer himself describes as not exactly as carefree as you might think. Yeah, they have rules. Lots of rules. And they aren't very open-minded as you hope. Indeed, the courtroom scene further emphasizes heaven's legalistic, self-righteous mindset, even though angels don't actually know why a soul earns damnation or a spot in heaven. By demystifying heaven so quickly, this essentially changes the direction of the show from an axiomatic acceptance that sinners should be redeemed to go to heaven, to questioning why would sinners want to be redeemed if heaven isn't as glamorous as it seems, especially if Charlie's Hotel can help them find connection and hope with each other, as evidenced in relationships like Angel Dust and Husk in episode 4, and Serpentius himself clearly becoming a good soul by the end of season 1. Thus, the show is pivoting its core mystery from the pilot's question of can sinners be redeemed to what are the qualifications for a soul to be redeemed or condemned? And perhaps it even takes us a step further to ask, is heaven even fitting as the true reward for/mark of a sinner's redemption? To me, all of this seems to imply that the end of the series will resolve with Charlie making Hell a better place in general to help her people rather than placing her faith in heaven, and that she will somehow renegotiate the terms of the extermination or find a way to get rid of it altogether. Or perhaps she will fail to do so, and the resolution to the series will be that she has failed in her endeavors and sinners are unable to be truly redeemed. But even if that's the larger direction the series wants to take on, it still needs to tie in these questions of redemption with the other central question of the series. Who is Alastor? This leads us to the third point. Season 1's careful development of Alastor crafts him into a devious, mysterious, and incredibly powerful overlord of Hell. Character introductions are important. and aside from Charlie, Alastor's is the most significant introduction in the series. Although we first see him watching Charlie from the store window of an abandoned radio shack, clever, his first proper introduction is after he shows up at the hotel after seeing her fiasco on the picture show, and he just couldn't resist. And the fact that he's actually the first wayward soul on Charlie's doorstep that answers her commercial also tells us that Alastor's character has an integral connection to the series' main question of redemption, and his ultimate fate will be linked to answering this question of if a sinner can receive true redemption. How many times can I say redemption? Alastor's importance in the narrative is further emphasized by the fact that, aside from Charlie's songs in the pilot, he's the only other character to have a dedicated solo musical number, and his song is a clear parallel to Charlie's with lyrics such as, "Inside of every demon is a lost cause, but we'll dress them up for now with just a smile, wicked smiles," countering Charlie's earlier insistence that inside of every demon is a rainbow, inside every sinner is a shiny smile, inside of every creepy hatchet-wielding maniac is a jolly, happy, cupcake-loving child. Additionally, if Alastor didn't get cut off by Sir Pentious' attack, he also would have done his own spin on Charlie's chorus that proclaims, "We can turn them round, they'll be heaven-bound, with just a little time down at the Happy Hotel," with his altered lyrics, "Here below the ground, I'm sure your plan is sound, they'll spend a little time down at this Hazbin hotel." And if the lyrics weren't enough evidence, the title of Alastor's song is literally called Alastor's reprise after Charlie's song, "Inside of every demon is a rainbow." Also, side note here, but just wanted to highlight that I saw a YouTube comment jokingly point out that Alastor doesn't have any songs of his own. He merely hijacks others or responds to others in his songs. But this is true? And I think it's kind of interesting that he doesn't have his own song and he is kind of the echo or response to other characters. Again, I feel like this kind of just solidifies the fact that he, as a character, is kind of the one that is connected to everybody else and is clearly going to be a cornerstone or a linchpin to kind of the deeper mysteries and plot of the story, but I digress. More evidence for Alastor serving as Charlie's thematic foil in her quest to bring redemption to her people is seen in their very first interaction. When Charlie asks Alastor if he thinks it's possible to rehabilitate a demon, like herself, his immediate response is, "Oh, of course not. That's wacky nonsense. Redemption. Oh, the non-existent humanity. No. I don't think that there's anything left that could save such loathsome sinners. The chance given was the life they lived before. The punishment is this. There is no undoing was done." Of course, there are other characters like Katie Killjoy that also don't believe in Charlie's vision, but they don't even bother checking into her hotel. Or characters like Angel Dust, who operate at best as a neutral character in the pilot. He doesn't initially believe in Charlie's vision and claims to live at the hotel only because Charlie lets him live there rent-free and crack is expensive. He also doesn't actually expend any effort to help Charlie clean up the hotel or promote its image, as evidenced by the fact he gets into a turf war during Charlie's press conference on 666 News. But Alastor is the first character to offer his patronage and powers to help Charlie achieve her dream, despite fundamentally disagreeing with her beliefs throughout the entire series. Although, of course, we know very little about Alastor's true motivations for why he wants to help Charlie run the hotel. When he's questioned by fellow overlord Zestiel, "How dost thou fall in such folly?" Alastor simply deflects with, "That is for me to know, but please do guess, I'd love to know the theories." To which Zestiel responds with, "'Twould be grander folly by far to assume the workings of your mind, Alastor. Thou hast been naught but an enigma since thy manifested in this realm." Indeed, the series constantly and consistently alludes to the fact that Alastor's true motivations and mysterious backstory are critical to the core narrative, and this is a main plot line of the show. For the purpose of this discussion, let's focus on what we know about Alastor as it relates to setting up his pivotal role in the series, and how it deepens our understanding of his character, as there are already plenty of excellent YouTube videos that are dedicated to discussing the fandom's theories as to Alastor's mysterious motivations and backstory. Regarding Alastor's motivations, the only official answer he gives is because, why does anyone do anything? Sheer, absolute boredom. I've lacked inspiration for decades. My work became mundane, lacking focus, aimless. I've come to crave a new form of entertainment. Consider it an investment in ongoing entertainment for myself. I want to watch the scum of the world struggle to climb up the hill of betterment, only to repeatedly trip and tumble down to the fiery pit of failure. Outside of this, 6 of the biggest hints regarding his actual, or perhaps additional, motivations for helping Charlie run the hotel are as follows. 1. Alastor is the one who changed the name from the Happy Hotel to the Hazbin Hotel. Although he doesn't explain why he chose his name, he clearly enjoys bragging about naming the hotel. 2. Alastor's 7-year disappearance is rumored to be him falling into holy arms, but he denies that it isn't so serious, and instead presents his disappearance as a well-earned sabbatical to Zestiel. 3. Alastor doesn't want danger brought to the hotel, and will only let Mimsy stay if she actually wants to try and seek redemption. 4. Alastor is consistently supportive of Charlie's very unique vision. Although this was partially said to rile up Lucifer, it is clear that he is, at least on some level, happy to fulfill her bizarre requests. 5. Alastor has a level of unwavering faith in Charlie's abilities and power that is filled with potential that he could guide. 6. Alastor has made a deal with an unknown entity that Husk knows about to some extent, and Alastor desires to find a way out of it, as he's hungry for freedom like never before. The constraints of his deal surely have a back door. Furthermore, once he finds a way to escape, Alastor clearly desires to be the one in control/power, pulling all the strings. All of these clues emphasize the significance of Alastor's character to the larger narrative. Firstly, the fact that he's the one who named the titular location, which is a character in and of itself, and the pilot hints at his importance to the series. Secondly, his 7-year disappearance and mysterious deal is clearly somehow linked to the tertiary mystery of the series, where is Charlie's mom, who has been absent for 7 years and is seen in heaven at the end of season 1. This potential connection will most likely continue to further the main narrative's quest to discover what redemption looks like and how Charlie can save her people from being exterminated. Thirdly, it's clear that Alastor has his own motivations for protecting the hotel and siding with Charlie, thereby intertwining their character arcs/trajectories. Animation is a visual medium, and Alastor and Charlie's complementary roles as main characters can even be seen in the fact that Alastor is clearly Charlie's visual parallel in his design. Both wear red-colored suits with bow ties, have horns, etc. And the original pilot thumbnail also proves this, as it prominently features himself and Charlie as the two main characters. Finally, all of these clues thus far clearly demonstrate that Alastor's arc and backstory will be fundamentally linked to the deeper thematic questions beyond the literal narrative that the show asks about redemption. Do all sinners deserve redemption? And what does getting true redemption mean/look like? As to Alastor's backstory, the series does provide a few pieces of straightforward information. We know that he was entertained by the stock market crash of 1929, that his mother once showed him a wonderful recipe for jambalaya, that his disappearance is a mystery to other overlords as well, and that he knew Mimsy in life. From this information, we can infer that Alastor is a mortal soul, most likely from Louisiana, since jambalaya is a regional dish that originated in the southern US, and that he was alive around the 1920s, 1930s. However, the most significant clues are mostly established through the reputation that precedes him, and come in the form of two critical monologues. One is delivered by Vaggie in the pilot, when Angel Dust says he's never heard of Alastor, and she characterizes the radio demon as one of the most powerful beings hell has ever seen. Quote, "Decades ago, Alastor manifested in hell, seemingly overnight. He began to topple overlords who have been dominant for centuries. That kind of raw power had never been harnessed by a mortal soul before. Then, he broadcast his carnage all throughout hell, just so everyone could witness his ability. Sinners started calling him the Radio Demon, as lazy as that is. Many have speculated what unimaginable force enabled him to rival our world's most ancient and destructive evils. But one thing's for sure, he's an unpredictable source of danger, a wicked spirit of mystery, and a violent monster of chaos, the likes of which we can't risk getting involved with unless we want to end up erased." This story is essentially confirmed by Mimsy, after Angel Dust says Alastor is still a big creepy mystery, and asks what Alastor's deal is. Although she jokingly adds, "That's the story most people know, but underneath it all, he's a total sweetie. Put on some jazz and pour a couple fingers of rye and he becomes a kitten." Alastor's status as a powerful overlord is further illustrated by the fact that he owns the souls of others like Husk, who used to be an overlord himself, and that he can force souls to stay at the hotel if he desires. Additionally, Alastor's status as a powerful overlord is also clearly important to actualizing Charlie's dream, as his patronage gives her hotel legitimacy. Vaggie points this out after Alastor shows them his commercial for the hotel when she says, "Nobody's gonna want to come to a place that a powerful overlord like you thinks is a waste of time." Not to mention that he is also able to help Charlie with repairs and construction. This is further evidenced by the fact Charlie tells Lucifer that, without Alastor, we wouldn't have been able to pretty it up this much. Alastor is also repeatedly mentioned as being unique in his overlord status, as he's a mortal soul that has vanquished overlords and demons that were in power for centuries. Despite his humble origins, his power is further underscored by the fact that other demons are scared of him, overlords like Zestiel respect him, and he clearly has history with his fellow overlords the V's. Specifically, he seems to have an intense rivalry with the television demon Vox, as he almost beat him that one time. In fact, my personal favorite number is Stayed Gone, where Alastor's threatening power against Vox is most prominently on display. Therefore, it is clear that the series has carefully built up and developed Alastor's character into someone who is quite high up the magical power org chart, as it were, and this leads us to my final point regarding magic systems, and the scene that bothered me so much in the first place, Alastor's battle with Adam. Although we've been discussing Alastor's power, what exactly do we mean when we say he's powerful? When creating a magical system for a fantasy story, it can fall on a spectrum from hard to soft magic, and even incorporate several types of magic systems into the narrative. Hello Future Me has wonderful videos on soft magic systems and hard magic systems that go into this in more depth. But essentially, a hard magic system has clearly defined rules, consequences, and limitations that govern what one can or cannot do with magic. Soft magic systems, on the other hand, often have a vague, undefined, or mysterious set of rules and limitations to being used. However, whatever system is used in the story, the most important rule to remember comes from Sanderson's 3 Rules of Magic that states, an author's ability to resolve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. Clearly, Hazbin Hotel has more of a soft magic system, as the specific limitations and powers of demons are pretty loosely defined. For instance, characters such as Charlie clearly possess powers, even if she rarely uses them as the Princess of Hell. And of course, Lucifer himself shows off his powers in the final battle with Adam. They also use their powers to rebuild the hotel, as seen in the finale, with lyrics like, "Good thing we're in hell, check out this low magic number. Start with foundation, remedial creation for me, it's as easy as can be," and a little sorcery. However, the limits of what they can and can't do are never clearly defined. Of course, the clearest example of this elasticity when it comes to Hazbin's soft magic system is seen in Alastor's powers. We see him use them in combat when he fights Serpentius, when he shuts down Vox Broadcast, gets rid of the loan sharks after Mimsy, and when he fights Adam. We also see him use his powers to summon Husk and Nifty and other voodoo spirits to help with the hotel. Additionally, Alastor is able to distort himself and reality when on camera, and he can conjure up equipment to help Vaggie make a commercial. He also clearly has some sort of connection to his radio mic stand as a means of amplifying or signifying his power, as it speaks to him in the pilot, and when it's broken in the final battle, Alastor's magic is also broken. Not to mention, of course, his mythic radio broadcasts that transmit the screams of souls he owns. However, there does seem to be one clear instance of hard magic: deal-making. This concept is introduced early on in the pilot when Vaggie warns Charlie against making any deals with Alastor. Charlie tells her not to worry as, she picked up one thing from her dad, you don't take shit from other demons. And she tells Alastor that she's willing to take his offer to help, on the condition that there be no tricks or voodoo strings attached. However, it's also clear that deals don't have to be made in order to use magic. After Charlie refuses Alastor's offer of making a deal, decreeing that as Princess of Hell and heir to the throne, she hereby orders that he helps with this hotel for as long as he desires. Alastor responds with, fair enough, before he helps her. This could mean that Alastor simply prefers to make deals before using his magic, as evidenced by his insistence to make a deal with Vaggie before helping her with the commercial, despite the fact that the deal is pretty simple and that Vaggie will never ask Alastor to engage with this frivolous television technology ever again, rather than something a bit more serious like owning her soul. But that being said, deals can also be fairly serious and tied with contracts to own souls, as Husk's backstory details. In fact, they seem to be specifically used for leveraging advantages over desperate demons, further evidenced by Rosie mentioning, you know, Alastor, I got a primo connect on a guy with about 8 blocks of territory and not enough goons to run it. Prime pickings for a deal to be made, my friend. Elaborating upon this concept, deals also seem to be used specifically to enact magical bonds and alliances, such as when Charlie finally agrees to make a deal with Alastor for an unspecified favor in the future, in which she harms no one, in exchange for information on how to kill angels. This scene immediately shows that a deep magical bond is formed between the two, despite the fact that Charlie still owns her soul, as evidenced from the musical cue and the animation color scheme change. However, outside of deal-making, the magic system of Hazbin is still pretty soft. Additionally, it's unclear as to the extent of powers other characters have. For instance, when Charlie and Vaggie come back to the hotel after going to Cannibal Town and Carmilla, they see Serpentius, Husk, Angel Dust, and Nifty all preparing for the battle using manual labor. Indeed, Serpentius seems to have more of a knack for inventing rather than any specific magical powers like Alastor displays. Therefore, as seen in Alastor's development thus far, and the current information the audience has regarding Hell's power structures and soft magic system, I expected Alastor to be a more formidable foe against Adam. Alastor has plenty of means, through innate power and the provided angelic weapons Vaggie secures, and motivation, as previously detailed, to defend the hotel properly, and the extent of his power has been teased for the entire series. Moreover, it felt like Alastor should have been on the same power level as Adam, as they're both technically mortal souls and seem like they should be fighting on an equal playing field as a sovereign overlord of hell and a divinely ordained soul of heaven. As Alastor's rebuttal to Adam's taunt that a mortal soul is no match for me, edgelord, states, Adam should know better than anyone what a soul can accomplish when they take charge of their own fate. Not to mention the fact that Alastor's elevated, self-assured dialogue in comparison to Adam's ineloquent swearing emphasizes his control over the situation. In fact, it's clear that the most powerful overlords like Zestio, Carmilla, and Rosie also rarely swear in the show, as their powerful status is self-evident and this confidence is demonstrated in their speech. As a result, this dialogue sets them apart, and fans of the show have repeatedly highlighted Alastor's elevated transatlantic dialogue style as a clue to his true power under a tight leash of self-control. And of course, he's never fully dressed without a smile. Therefore, the fact that Alastor was quickly defeated in a mere 1 minute 27 seconds was a huge letdown. Or, as Hello Future Me put it, audiences can sometimes feel, quote, cheated by soft magic, because it's much harder to predict where it can be used or what it can do. Another glaring example in which this feeling of being cheated occurs is in Alastor's relationship with Lucifer. If Alastor was easily defeated by Adam, who was in turn easily defeated by Lucifer, then the antagonistic relationship that develops between Alastor and Lucifer in the song Hell's Greatest Dad is undermined, as the song clearly presents them as equals in their rivalry, or at the very least equals in their pettiness. Of course, some theories have posited that Alastor was unable to use his full power due to his mysterious deal, but I'm somewhat skeptical of this, as his solo moment in the finale gives us insight into his true feelings about how he barely escaped being killed by a hair. And even if it's true that his deal somewhat limits the scope of his powers, the parameters as to how magic is used and/or unable to be used were still not clearly communicated to the viewer. What is clear, however, is that in terms of Alastor's arc, the creators wanted to incorporate this character beat at the potential midpoint of the series. Most likely because they wanted to push Alastor to his limit in order to induce a serious turning point for his character to develop either positively or negatively towards redemption after what was most likely his first brush with defeat or death in a long time. It makes sense that only a threat to his personal safety would induce this type of dramatic change in Alastor, as the actual affection he feels for any other character, if any at all, is still fairly ambiguous. Furthermore, this turn sets up Alastor's development in the second act, in which he will probably have to re-examine what he knows about Hell and his place and power within the realm, as he's been gone a long time. Indeed, several figures have warned him that things have changed since he was last active in Hell throughout Season 1. Additionally, by bringing Alastor down to his lowest, this nicely sets up his moment of triumph once he casters in the mysterious favor he asks of Charlie in Episode 7. All of this positions his character to be a potential Darth Vader-like figure, and that he is a servant to a more powerful entity, and his role as an anti-hero or fallen hero or tragic figure, etc., seems even more likely as the series continues to push the question of what a happy ending for a character like Alastor even looks like, and if redemption is even possible for him. If this really ends up being Alastor's potential character trajectory, it all works for me. But I still think it would have been better to trigger this turn with a different scene. Perhaps Alastor almost died through some other means. Or he wasn't even involved in the final battle, instead slinking off to set up something off-screen regarding his deal. Or, if the creators still wanted to set Adam up as Alastor's opponent, they should have clarified Adam and Alastor's respective power levels. Or at the very least, offered additional information that Alastor's reputation may not be as powerful as believed. In short, if the show had more time to develop its magic system and give the audience more substantive grounding for how it works, Alastor's turn would have stuck the landing. Because teasing him as a big bad for 8 episodes only to be quickly cut down in the Season 1 finale feels like a disservice to the groundwork they put in for the previous 8 episodes. So, in summary, the reason the fight scene between Alastor and Adam didn't land for me was because 1. The pacing felt rushed, 2. The show didn't provide crucial information regarding how its power structure worked in its world building. 3. Alastor's character development, thus far, didn't support a reading of him as a weak character. And 4. The nature of a soft magic system's unpredictability worked against the development of the above and therefore left the viewer feeling cheated. To be fair to Hazbin Hotel, the show gets a lot of things right. It's honestly probably one of the most anti-Disney, Disney-esque shows ever. I mean, it centers around a quirky, adorable princess that doesn't fit in with the rest of her world, who tackles her problems through musical numbers. And there's plenty to praise, from its beautiful animation to amazing voice acting, and, of course, the musical numbers that are insanely catchy. And I do think the creators understand that the world Hazbin takes place in can go far beyond the 2-season run, as they're building out the world through other avenues. For instance, developing ancillary content like Hell of a Boss as a spin-off show set in the same universe. However, it would still be great to communicate a few more critical details to the series canon to punch up the main body of work. So if Season 2 truly ends up being its last, then I wish the creative team the best of luck. There's clearly a lot more story they want to tell in a short amount of time. However, I believe that with a slight course correction in the second series, by paring down the concepts, characters, and settings, by fleshing out a few more elements of its world building specifically related to the governing powers of Hell and Heaven, and by focusing in on clarifying a few more aspects regarding its soft magic system, the series could really be something special. There's so much potential for this show to stick its landing, and say some interesting things about what true redemption looks like, and if, indeed, everyone deserves it, including serial killers like Alastor, who, let's be honest, stole the show as soon as he stepped on screen. I was hooked as soon as I saw him. I absolutely loved his radio voice effect. It was so unique, and I thought his character's take on that, mysterious, calculating, maybe antagonist to the main heroes was fantastic. And if there's an option for a renewal for a 3rd season, I'll be excited to see what it looks like. Because low-key, I want the series to have 3 seasons so we can have some amazing divine comedy parallels, with the 1st season taking place in Hell, the 2nd season in Purgatory, and the 3rd season in Heaven. But I digress, these are just personal wants as a fan, and the series will be amazing whether or not it has 2 seasons, 3 seasons, or more. Anyways, I can't wait for Season 2, and as Alastor tells us, I'm definitely staying tuned. Because he definitely deserves to get his revenge on Adam, and I want to see the weird deer man wreak havoc. My fave deserves justice, and he likes to do evil. Okay, just let him have this. Thanks. And thank you to everyone who's commented, and subscribed so far. I'll see you all in my next video.